Welcome to the Frontier Voice of Nutrition Remarks. Here we focus on the relationship between food cost and associated health outcomes. We interviewed Dr. Anju Aggrawal regarding their most recent systematic study.
The dietary guidelines for Americans recommend consumption of foods and beverages that are nutrient dense. Such diets are characterized by higher consumption of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, with much lower consumption of fats and added sugars. The purpose of these dietary guidelines are to allow us to meet our daily nutrient requirements without exceeding our calorie intake. However, what you see in the current graph is that most of the Americans are not able to meet their dietary recommendations. As you focus on the upper part of the graph, you see that the consumption of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables is much lower than what is recommended. Whereas if you see on the lower part of the graph, you see that there is excessive consumption of fats, refined grains, and sugars. The focus of our research is to investigate or look into factors that determine food choices and in turn determine food intake of individuals. There are many factors that determine what we eat, such as cost, taste, convenience, health, and variety. For the purpose of today's presentation, let's focus on the cost variable. We wanted to examine the role of diet cost in determining our diet quality. So we recently conducted a study based on a representative sample of adult residents of Seattle-King County, which consisted of 2,000 males and females. We collected detailed data on what they eat and examined it in relation to their cost. For analytical purpose, we divided our respondents into quintiles by individual nutrient intakes. Therefore, on x-axis, you see 5 groups of quintiles categorizing respondents based on their nutrient intake. And we compared the diet cost of respondents who fell in the higher quintiles compared to those who fell in lower quintiles. So let's just focus on the red lines now, which indicate the consumption of fats and sugars. Again, to remind you, these are the food components which are recommended to be consumed in lower amounts by our dietary guidelines. But what we see here is that the lower consumption of sugars and fats is actually associated with higher diet cost. Whereas if you look at quintiles 4 and 5, those individuals who had higher consumption of sugars and fats had much lower diet cost. Now let's see what happens when we examine the same trends with beneficial nutrients. And we see that the trend totally reverses. So if you look at the upper end of the graph, you see that intakes of all the beneficial nutrients such as vitamins and minerals is positively associated with diet cost. That is, higher intakes of vitamins and minerals is associated with much higher diet cost. This is in contrast to red lines which indicate that higher intakes of sugars and fats is actually associated with lower diet cost. However, the good news is that not all the beneficial nutrients cost equally more. So if you look at the purple and blue line on top, which indicate the intake of magnesium, potassium, and vitamin C, we see that the consumption of or higher intakes of such nutrients is associated with much higher diet cost. This could be attributed to expensive food sources of these nutrients in the diet, such as fruits and vegetables. Now, if you compare this to green lines, which indicate the consumption of calcium, vitamin D, and folate, higher intakes of these nutrients is not associated with equally higher diet cost. And this could be because of relatively cheaper food sources of such nutrients in our diet, that is, fortified juices, fortified cereals, milk, and milk products. So the overall message from these figures is that higher intakes of beneficial nutrients do cost more, whereas higher intakes of sugar and fats help you lower your diet cost. So does that mean we always need to spend more to eat healthy foods? We need to spend more to have beneficial nutrients in our diet? The good answer is no. This is because the relations that we observed between nutrient intakes and diet cost are all based on dietary patterns that are currently being followed by Americans. But this does not mean that all beneficial nutrients only come from expensive food sources. There are affordable food sources for every nutrient in the diet as long as we are willing to consume it. What does this imply? This means that we can eat healthy within our budget as long as first, we prioritize healthy eating. We need to educate ourselves of all the affordable sources of various nutrients in our diet. and need to shop wisely and select such healthier, inexpensive options. We need to be willing to change our dietary habits, to cook at home, to select healthier options. And how we can make this practical would be to have our dietary guidelines modified, which can help us to identify affordable sources of various nutrients in our diet. Thank you.